Now today I want to get down to the nitty gritty. I've been doing this show for a while now, and I think something really needs to be addressed about the hypocrisy and short-sightedness of these so-called movie reviewers out there. And I don't think there's a better place to start than Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
I effing love that movie.
Stupid.
Great flick! Great friggin' flick!
Eat shit.
Now what we're talking about here is the revisionist history that comes with watching movies as indisputably badass as the Indiana Jones movies. And look, I get it. When you walk down the street with your girlfriend and you see guys like me and Harrison Ford living our best lives, you get intimidated. And rather than hit the gym and get rid of that gut, you hit the internet and start complaining about all the things that offend you.
You are the ones who are the ball lickers.
And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is no different. But before we get into that, let's start at the beginning. Raiders of the Lost Ark, or what I like to call Indiana Jones versus these two beta boys. Now, as you all know, I'm new to this whole internet thing, and so I've had to backtrack as far as I could to find out where this hatred for great movies came from. And it was long before the Red Letter Star Wars review, the squealing nostalgia guy, and even that angry video game nerd. I can't remember what his name was, but he's pretty cool though. Long before all them, as far as I can tell, it was these two flip-floppers. They are the witless pricks that seem to have started it all. These two guys who, by the way, sit on literally the worst set I've ever seen. It's called an HD camera, boomers. Get one already. Am I right, kids? Anyway, they sit and talk about all the nostalgic movies that we grew up with, and even ones that no one cares about. Like, these Streisand's actually talk about Barbra Streisand movies.
All right, guy.
Boo this man!
What the hell's that for? Or what, because I said gay? I didn't mean it the way that you guys think I meant it. I meant, you know, like they enjoy having sex with men. What the hell do you mean I can't say that? I thought there was nothing wrong with being gay. You telling me gay guys don't like Barbra Streisand? She's fabulous. Canceled. I thought this was YouTube. How could a YouTube show get canceled? Alright, my bad. I meant these guys are gay as in, you know, happy.
We'll have a gay old time.
Happy to rip our movies to shreds, and from now on, if I ever use the word gay, it more than likely means happy. Got it? Back to business. Now, I know what a lot of you are saying. Hey, OX, didn't Siskel and Ebert like Raiders of the Lost Ark?
It has everything. Forgotten tombs, giant tarantulas, evil, bloodthirsty Nazis, thousands of poisonous snakes, and the best chase scene I've ever seen in a movie. I really love this film.
Well, so did I, and I can't recommend a film more than this one.
Yup, they sure did. They loved how lighthearted and fun it was, how bumbling Indy was, getting into one mess after another. They loved that it was a return to the old-style adventure serials that they grew up with. In short, they ate up everything Spielberg was selling to them. And with such a glowing review, you'd think that Spielberg and Lucas would just go on and do the same thing, right? So how did we end up with this? Well, it's because, much like the internet today, these couple of boob tubers had a little bit of a different take about Indiana Jones a few months later.
The characters in Raiders of the Lost Ark may be chronological adults, but emotionally they're certainly teenagers. They don't like to get into a lot of that sissy romantic slop. They'd rather go out and have a good adventure. Let's look, for example, at the women in these films. They tend to be tomboy types, best pals, reckless, brave, impulsive, loyal, and tough. Not a man's woman, but a boy's woman. They wear jeans more than they wear makeup, and instead of the mystery and allure of the movie's traditional glamorous leading ladies, they've got good sport written all over their faces.
That's right. Your saviors went all Force Awakens on Indiana Jones and went from being blown away by its nostalgic bliss and excellent execution and started wondering why Indy didn't have a bigger hard-on for Karen Allen. That's right, folks. Meet the birthplace of the not gays. These two guys forgot that they just plain enjoyed the first movie, started feeling all icky and gross that Indy didn't seem to be DTF. Because if you ain't DTF when abroad's right there, you must be,
Emotionally, they're certainly teenagers.
So these two manly dudes started calling out this and other movies for not shoehorning in a love story and a damsel for the hero to save. And so, of course, what did we get in Indy 2? So if you're ever wondering why Spielberg put this hot broad in the movie and asked her to scream the whole time, you can bet it has something to do with criticism like that. But guess what, internerds? Even with all that aside, this movie is far more misunderstood and, dare I say, bullied than it could ever possibly deserve to be. Constantly criticized for being too dark and offensively racist and different from the original. Sit back and let the Oxman explain to you why none of that is true and why Temple of Doom might very well be the best Indiana Jones ever freaking made. So we start in the Obi-Wan Cafe on Tatooine, where we meet Spielberg's smoking hot wife, Willie from Temple of Doom.
Anything goes.
Notice the choice of song, Anything Goes. Now, forget the fact that she's just like faking her way through the lyrics until she gets to the key line. There's a reason why Spielberg insisted she at least learn the words, anything goes. She's literally looking right at the audience and letting you know it's time to check that brain at the door, kick back, and enjoy a fun action-adventure movie. Intellectuals like myself, we don't even bring our brains to a flick called Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So Indy makes his way down the ramp in 1935, which makes this a prequel. But it's before Lucas and gang really understood how to do a proper prequel, so we get very few foreshadows to Raiders of the Lost Ark. A couple of instances of Indy being scared of snakes, that's about it. Like I said, these hacks didn't know how to make a great prequel like episode 1 yet. Like, I think it would have been cool if Indy looked down at that bag at the beginning and was like, nice try, D-bag. But I can tell just by looking at it that it doesn't weigh what it should. You know, a little hint of what's to come. Ooh, and like when the Indian old man is telling him about the stones, he could have been like, these stones are important to us, as important as the Holy Grail. And then Indy could have looked right at the camera and been like, the Holy Grail? I'd sooner go after the Lost Ark than the Holy Grail. Instead, all this movie does is change Indy from a skeptical scholar in search of fortune and glory to a believer of the supernatural. You know, someone who would actually go out and try and discover things like the Lost Ark and the Holy Grail. So as usual, Indy gets himself into a spot of trouble right at the beginning as he drinks his drink, and the China guys are all like, ha ha ha, that's fast acting poison. But apparently fast acting is kind of a relative term, because Indy hardly feels any effects as they start kicking the antidote and the diamond around like some sort of deranged football game. Then the Ninja Turtles roll through, kicking the ooze around. And then Mr. Freeze shows up and Batman and Robin start playing hockey with the diamond. It gets knuck and futz real quick. Check out this wicked spine buster by Indy.
Look out!
Also, here's Indy knocking out this lady selling cigarettes in the greatest anti-smoking ad ever in a movie. Spielberg was blunt as hell in these days. He was like, oh, you're scared of gremlins? Don't worry, they aren't real, but you know what? Also, neither is Santa Claus. And then in this movie, he's got Indiana Jones knocking out this lady just to make his anti-smoking statement. Like an asshole. So Indy and Willie pull a Selena Kyle and drop in on Short Round, played by that kid from Goonies. And you know what? This kid's awesome, but it highlights my major gripe about this movie. As I mentioned, this is a prequel, but Spielberg and Lucas didn't know how to do that yet. If it was made today, this movie would have been made 10 years before Raiders, and Short Round would be Marion Cravenwood as a kid. And really, that's the only way that this movie could have been better.
Wow! Holy smoke! Crash landing!
So Short Round drives him to the airport, where we have a Mace Windu level wasted cameo as the man himself, Ray Stantz, aka the white dude from Trading Places, is in the movie for like 12 seconds, and his only job is to tell us that Willie is a famous singer from America.
Heavens, aren't you Willie Scott, the famous American female vocalist?
So Indy and crew are as bumbling as they were in Raiders as they hitch a ride on an airplane that's literally owned by the guy they were just fighting. And then check this out. Now, according to my 56K internet connection, it takes like 8 hours to fly to Shanghai, and I'm assuming that's in a 2020s commercial jetliner, which means that these two guys flew Indy and company for probably like 10 hours in this dinky 2-engine plane, including this random turn in Chungking. Also, they could dump what little gas they had left and jump out in the middle of nowhere? Why? Who's gonna pick those guys up? Hell, it seems like everyone aboard was asleep the entire friggin' time, so why not a couple 3 bullets and just ditch the bodies Con Air style? After the pilots bail out, Willie takes the opportunity to create the clip that everyone uses to show how she's just a screechy damsel in distress. Why do I bring that up? Oh, we'll get to that. See that, Spielberg? That's called foreshadowing.
Dr. Jones! No more parachutes!
That's not a problem for Indiana Jones, who whips out the obvious solution, an emergency life raft. Now before I bust the myth that Mythbusters perpetuated by busting the myth that Indiana Jones and crew couldn't survive a crash by using a life raft, figure I would just go ahead and double jump you idiots right now and remind you that if life rafts are useless in a plane crash, why do they always tell you that your seat is equipped with a flotation device even if you're flying over the middle of the desert? I would love to see you idiots myth bust that fact. So they sled down the mountain Clark Griswold style into a river, and I suppose the life raft floating in the river is probably unrealistic too, right? So once a river calms down, they realize that they're in India. And at last, we have arrived to the start of the main problem people have with this movie, the setting in India, which as we proceed, we'll find out people will say is portrayed as racist and offensive. Why am I bringing this up now when they reach the tiny poor village in India rather than at the moment in the film that everyone talks about? Simple, a little thing that the French like to call whatever the word for context is. So they arrive at the small village, and what is literally the first thing that the people that need help do? They feed them. And what do they feed them? Traditional Indian food. As India points out, more than they eat in a week. Small portions and not the best presentation, yeah, as you would expect from any poor village, whether in India or the freaking nuns in Sister Act.
Gee, what are you people, a critic and all this stuff? Is terrible. It tastes like
That's racist.
And by the way, what does Indy do? He scolds Willie for being disrespectful to their culture and hospitality. Keep that in mind as we get further into this offensive movie. The old man tells him about how Bangkok Palace is occupied once again by the Thuggee cult, and I guess now would be as good a time as any to let everyone know that the Thuggee cult is based off an actual cult in India called the Thuggees that worshipped Kali and participated in ritualistic sacrifices and are literally the most murderous cult in history, having killed over 4,000 people before the British government eradicated them in the late 1800s. So you know what that means. Portraying the return of that cult means that all of India and all of Indian culture is like that. I know that that's true because everyone thinks that all Americans are psycho cult members that sacrifice children on Halloween because that's what happens in Halloween 3. And I never traveled to Texas because everyone in Texas is a psycho cannibal because I saw that in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Oh, and just to use an analogy from this very trilogy, I forgot that all Germans are effeminate acting Nazis, hell-bent on immortal power because that's how the bad guys are in the other two Indiana Jones movies.
Die Amerikaner, die kämpfen wie Weiber.
We are not thirsty.
So we get to the offensive scene that makes this movie racist, and because we've seen real Indian food before, we should take a little bit of context clues into this and realize that these people that Indy suspects are evil are probably not eating traditional Indian food. Nothing about the people in this scene, who make no mistake about it, are all part of the Thuggee cult, is portrayed as being traditional Indian behavior and culture. Look, Indy gets it. He's not insisting that everyone eat as to not offend the culture now. In fact, he's openly insulting the hosts for their beliefs.
In our country, it's not usual for a guest to insult his host.
The exact opposite of what he was doing before. These two dinner scenes are very clearly positioned to show the difference between the cult and the people in the Indian village who represent traditional Indian culture. Ah yes, and now we have the sequence that is strictly there to remind you that, hey, Indy ain't gay. And the only thing that's going to make him gay is a night of romance with Willie. So even though he's been annoyed to the core by screeching Willie the entire movie, when the night hours come, Indy's ready to get some of that action. You know, because she's a woman. Oh yeah, is now a good time to remind you of how Siskel and Ebert referred to Short Round and Willie?
Those are his helpers in the picture, a cute little Chinese kid and a nightclub floozy.
Yeah, these are also the guys that'll get up on their soapboxes and tell the world that anyone who likes slasher movies hates women.
These films hate women, and unfortunately, the audiences that go to them don't seem to like women too much either.
Classy guys. So Indy and Willie get ready for a night of romance as the shots go back and forth between the rooms, and apparently 5 minutes is too long to wait for this cuck back here because he decides that it's time to strangle Indiana Jones out of nowhere. But luckily Short Round wakes up in the nick of time so that he and Indy can double team this dude and hang him from the fan. Indy proves for one last time that he ain't into dudes by grabbing the statue by the tits and finding a secret passage. This, of course, leads to another box being ticked off the checklist of things that make an Indiana Jones movie. In this case, an encounter with some gruesome, disgusting critters. And it's right about here where one starts to wonder why this movie is so reviled. Wait a second, is that Willie being an active and useful character in spite of being scared? But I thought she was just a nightclub flute or, damsel in distress that only needed to be saved by horny Anna Jones. Oh, right, but you can make a montage of her screaming, so that means that that's all she does. I forgot how internet logic works. So Indy and his crew discover that the Thuggee/Kali cult is in fact real, and suddenly Indy starts to grow as a character. You know, one of those McDonald's story arcs? Which, by the way, Raiders of the Lost Ark often gets knocked for not having, since Indy is basically a spectator in his own adventure. Hell, his name's even missing from the title of the first movie. From this point on, Indiana Jones is no longer worried about fortune and glory. He's worried about getting back the stones whose power he just witnessed. This is further cemented when he hears the screams and cries of the slave children. But of course, it wouldn't be an Indiana Jones movie if, just like Willie and Short Round before him, Indy gets himself caught like an asshole. And they make him drink this collie blood, and anyone who's seen Lost Boys knows how stupid that is.
You drank someone's blood? Are you crazy?
So now Indy's under the spell of the Kali cult as they start to perform the sacrifice we saw before, but this time on Willie, and it has to be said, this is Spielberg direction at its best. Seriously, this scene and the death trap from earlier are just vintage Spielberg, playing with suspense, action, and even a little bit of emotion as the power of love helps to snap Indy out of it. But remember that scene with the gross food? That means the whole movie sucks, and Spielberg thinks all Indian people are like that. So Indy snaps out of it and starts kicking ass.
Kendo sticks. These Singapore canes are legal to use anywhere you want. Well, let's face it, Stephen Richards, he's tobacco. Oh, listen to this chant now.
Check it out, there's the dude with the glasses from the dinner scene, part of the cult. So after Indy and Short Round clear the ring and save Willie from being crucified by the Undertaker, they're like, it's time to GTFO. And Indy, being the badass hero that he is like,
Right. All of us.
For God's sake! Jones is ready and wanting to fight. Oh! What? Jones is shut the hell are you doing? Look at that! Oh! What the? Good God! Good God! That's it, he's dead. Well, somebody stop the damn man! They're right above us, folks, and I don't like it a damn bit.
And this leads to the absolutely amazing mining cart chase. And it's right about this point where I start to realize that the detractors of this movie might just be cherry-picking complaints to make it seem worse than it actually is. Because this cart scene, again, masterclass in direction, editing, pacing, everything that makes a great movie. Oh, and check it out. You got every character, including Willie, being an active part of the fight. It's almost like our hero has made his companions more heroic as well. The mark of a good protagonist, by the way. So Mola Ram floods the tunnel with water and the group escapes just in the nick of time. And now we come to one of the best indie endings of all time, the bridge scene. Again, masterful direction by Spielberg as all of our heroes end up surrounded by the evil Thuggies. And as they close in on him, Indy says exactly what the audience is thinking.
Oh, shit.
And he tells Marion, or Short Round, his plan. So he cuts the bridge, and I think they actually killed some dudes. Look at those arms flailing and those legs kicking. 80s effects were freaking bomb. So they all end up hanging from the bridge, and look, this scene works so well that Indy stops Mola Ram from ripping his heart out by pulling the oldest bully trick in the book.
Stop hitting yourself! Stop hitting yourself! Stop hitting yourself!
And that causes Mola Ram to book it up the ladder bridge, but Indy's all mad, dodging falling bodies and whatnot. Then Mola Ram orders the Thuggies to stop watching and do something. But apparently the Thuggies are like proto-stormtroopers and each only equipped with like one arrow apiece, because they stop firing after one round like a bunch of assholes. But that's good news for our heroes, as Willie and Short Round both stomp on Mola Ram's hands. Rather than waiting around to be saved like a damsel in distress. It's almost as if the character people dismiss based on the first half of the movie are willfully ignoring the entirety of the movie. So Indy shows off his newly found faith in all things supernatural by chanting and declaring that Mola Ram betrayed Shiva. He lets 2 of the stones fall to the river below. A nice visual indication that his search for fortune and glory has now changed to preserving the artifacts that are important to other people's cultures. Man, what a racist movie. Oh hey, check it out. The British guy from the dinner scene that was there to inspect Bangkok Palace returned with the freaking Indian army to take out the cult. And look, they're killing the bad guys who we saw eating all the gross stuff. It's almost as if when you open your eyes and watch the movie from start to finish, the idea that a cult of evil Kali worshippers is pretty clearly separated from how the portrayal of actual Indian culture is. So Indy, Short Round, and Willie make their way back to the village, and just to hammer the point home a little bit more, check out Confident Ass Willie. Damsel in distress? I guess if you only watch the first half of the movie, but by the end, Willie is an active part in the action. And there's no better visual cue of her arc than her leaving the village, riding on an elephant backwards and crying, and returning to the village, smiling and happy on her own 2 feet. Plus she's smoking hot. And I'm sorry, what exactly is more heroic than this scene right here? Oh, and if you were too dumb to understand Indy's change in character, Indy basically looks right at the camera and explains it.
Now, you can see the magic of the rock. You bring back.
Yes. I understand its power now.
That's for all of you. Why would a scholar archaeologist spend time trying to unravel magical stuff like the Last Ark and the Holy Grail? Welp, now we know why it's a prequel. It's called Motivation, Spielberg. Great freaking job. As you can tell, most everything you've heard about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is a load of garbage perpetuated by people taking scenes and clips out of context and pretending that their interpretation is 100% correct.
Garbage day! Huh? No!
Now my final thoughts on Temple of Doom are simple. This movie makes me gay as fuck. And in the spirit of learning the internet, I found out the thing to do is to give your movies a rating. And I figure since everyone seems to love that Emoji Movie, I should probably use one of those. So I'm giving Indy 2 this one, because this movie is the shit. In fact, I give it 3 shit emojis because it's triple the shit. What exactly is there to hate about it? It's an action-adventure movie, chock full of some awesome special effects, direction, humor, drama, a dash of unnecessary romance with a smoking hot actress, and some badass character development to boot. These are action-adventure movies, folks. They should not be taken too seriously.